Close your eyes and imagine the timeline of human history. We've been taught a very specific story, that we started with stone tools, spent millennia in the dark, and only recently, in the last blink of a cosmic eye, did we master complex engineering, chemistry, and flight. It's a neat, comfortable, linear ladder of progress. But what if that ladder is a lie? Scattered across the globe, buried under layers of ancient sediment, and locked behind the glass of museum basements, are objects that shouldn't exist. They are the glitches in our reality. We're talking about a 400-million-year-old hammer encased in solid rock. We're talking about Roman glassware built with nanotechnology that we only discovered in the 1990s. We're talking about massive stone blocks in the Andes cut with such surgical precision that modern lasers would struggle to mimic them. Mainstream science calls them out-of-place artifacts. Most experts look at them and they look away. Because to acknowledge them is to admit that our ancestors weren't just primitive. They might have been our equals or even our superiors, in ways we can't yet comprehend. Tonight, we aren't looking at myths or legends. We are looking at cold, hard physical evidence. From the peaks of Bolivia to the tombs of Egypt, we are counting down 10 ancient discoveries that modern science simply has no answer for. Buckle up. History is about to get complicated. We begin our countdown in June 1936 in the small town of London, Texas. Max Hahn and his wife were out for a simple stroll along Red Creek when they spotted something wrong. Protruding from a loose chunk of rock was a piece of wood. It looked like an ordinary branch at first, but upon closer inspection it was clearly a handle. Curiosity took over. They took the rock home, and a decade later, their son cracked it open. What he found inside sent shockwaves through the local community and, eventually, the entire world of archaeology. It wasn't a fossil. It wasn't a strange mineral formation. It was a hammer. A man-made, iron-headed tool, completely encased in solid limestone. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a common 19th-century miner's tool that someone simply dropped. But here's where the impossible part begins. Geologists who examined the surrounding rock confirmed that the limestone was part of the Edwards Formation. That rock was formed during the Cretaceous period. We are talking about a time when dinosaurs, not humans, ruled the Earth. Specifically, this rock is estimated to be between 110 and 115 million years old. Some even argue it belongs to an even older layer, dating back 400 million years. Let that sink in for a second. According to the history books we all studied, humans didn't start making tools like this until maybe 10,000 years ago. So how did a modern-looking hammer end up inside a rock that existed before the first bird ever took flight? The mystery deepens when you look at the hammer itself. The metal head is composed of 96.6% iron, 2% chlorine, and 0.7% sulfur. This is an incredibly pure form of iron, purer than anything typically produced by the coal smelting processes of the 19th century. Even more baffling? Since it was chiseled out of that rock in the 40s, the iron hasn't rusted. Not a single spot. It's as if the metal was treated with a technology we are still trying to perfect today. Critics claim it's a concretion, that minerals simply dissolved and hardened around a discarded tool very quickly. But if that's true, why is the wooden handle partially turned to coal? Carbonization like that usually requires immense pressure and vast amounts of time. Is it a hoax, a freak of nature, or evidence that a technologically advanced civilization was walking the Earth 100 million years before we arrived? Science remains silent, but the hammer sits there, cold and solid, defying everything we think we know. For our 9th discovery, we head to the cold, battle-scarred lands of Northern Europe. Between the years 800 and 1000 AD, the Vikings were the most feared warriors on Earth. But their greatest secret wasn't just their courage, it was their steel. Archaeologists have recovered about 170 ancient swords, inscribed with a mysterious word, plus VLFHT plus. At first, these were thought to be just high-quality Viking weapons. But when modern metallurgists put them under the microscope, they were stunned. These swords are made of crucible steel, a metal so pure and strong that it shouldn't have existed in Europe for another 800 years. You see, to make steel this pure, you need to heat iron to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, about 1,650 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, the slag, the impurities in the metal, liquefies and can be removed, leaving behind a carbon-rich steel that is incredibly flexible and almost impossible to break. Here's the problem. During the Viking Age, European furnaces weren't even close to being hot enough to achieve this. The technology to reach those temperatures didn't officially appear in Europe until the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century. So, how did a 9th-century blacksmith create a blade that is nearly identical in chemical composition to modern surgical steel? Some researchers believe the secret came from the East. The Vikings were traders as much as they were raiders. There is evidence they traveled the Volga trade route all the way to Central Asia, where Damascus steel was being developed. But even that doesn't fully explain it. The ULFBERHT swords are actually purer than most contemporary blades from the East. The precision is terrifying. If you heat the metal just a few degrees too low, the sword becomes brittle. A few degrees too high, and it ruins the blade. This required a scientific understanding of carbon ratios and thermal dynamics that we didn't think existed 1,000 years ago. The ULFBERHT sword was the Ferrari of its time, a weapon from the future found in the hands of medieval warriors. It stands as a chilling reminder that while we think history is a slow climb out of the mud, sometimes the people of the past were carrying secrets that we are only now beginning to understand. Our 8th discovery brings us face to face with a puzzle that has left historians scratching their heads for over 2 centuries. Imagine walking through an ancient Roman site and digging up an object that looks like it belongs in a science fiction movie. It is a hollow, bronze, 12-sided shell, a dodecahedron. Each of its 12 pentagonal faces has a circular hole of a different diameter, and at every corner there's a small, decorative brass knob. Since the first one was found in 1739, we have discovered more than 100 of these objects across Europe, from the foggy fields of Britain to the borders of Germany and France. But here's the kicker. In the vast, meticulous library of Roman literature, through thousands of scrolls describing everything from military tactics to tax laws, there is not a single mention of this object. No name, no manual, no purpose. For decades, experts have been playing a high-stakes game of guess what this is. Some historians suggested they were candle holders because wax residue was found inside one. Others argued they were dice for an ancient game, or perhaps scepters used by high-ranking priests to show their status. But these theories quickly fall apart. Why the different-sized holes? Why the complex geometry? In recent years, the internet and independent researchers have proposed a more practical, yet mind-blowing theory. They were knitting tools. Specifically, tools used to weave the fingers of woolen gloves. If you wrap yarn around the knobs and use the holes to guide the fabric, you can create a perfect glove. It sounds logical, right? But critics point out that many dodecahedrons show no signs of wear and tear, and some are far too ornate for a common household chore. Another fascinating possibility? They were sophisticated astronomical instruments. By looking through the different-sized holes at specific stars or the sun, Roman farmers could have determined the exact date for planting winter grain. This would make the dodecahedron a handheld, analog calendar of incredible precision. Yet, none of these answers are definitive. We are looking at a mass-produced technology that was spread across an entire empire, used by thousands of people, and then it simply vanished from the human memory. Every time we think we've figured out the Roman mind, an object like this appears to remind us. There are parts of their world that remain completely alien to ours. What was it? A tool for a master weaver, a secret of the Druids, or a calculator for the stars? We might never know. In 1850, legendary archaeologist Sir John Layard was excavating the royal palace of Nimrud in modern-day Iraq when he pulled a strange object from the dust. It was a small piece of rock crystal, oval-shaped and carefully ground. To a casual observer, it looked like a piece of ancient jewelry. But when Layard held it up to a piece of text, the letters grew larger. He wasn't just holding a rock, he was holding a lens. The NIMRUD lens dates back over 2,700 years to the Assyrian Empire. Now think about that for a moment. According to our standard history of science, the first optical lenses were developed in the 13th century, and the telescope wasn't invented until the early 1600s. Yet, here is a physical focalizing lens from nearly 3 millennia ago. When scientists at the University of Rome analyzed the crystal, they discovered something staggering. This wasn't just a polished stone, it was a plano-convex lens. It was ground with a mathematical precision that suggests the Assyrians understood the laws of refraction. But what was it used for? This is where the mystery gets truly deep. Professor Giovanni Pettinato proposed a theory that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. He noted that the ancient Assyrians had an incredibly advanced knowledge of astronomy. They described the planet Saturn as a god surrounded by a ring of serpents. Here's the catch. You cannot see the rings of Saturn with the naked eye. It's physically impossible. You need at least a low-power telescope. Is it possible that the NIMRUD lens was part of an ancient Assyrian telescope? If true, it means the scientific revolution happened 2,000 years earlier than we thought, and then the technology was somehow lost to time. Of course, mainstream skeptics have their own answers. They argue it was just a magnifying glass for master craftsmen to do fine engraving, or perhaps a simple burning glass used to start fires by focusing sunlight. But even if it was just a magnifying glass, it still shatters our timeline. It proves that the ancients had mastered the art of optics, the science of light, while we assume they were still living in a world of primitive tools. The NIMRUD lens sits today in the British Museum, a small, cloudy piece of crystal that holds a giant secret. Was it a window to the stars, or a tool for a forgotten master? Either way, it proves that the ancient eyes saw much further than we ever gave them credit for. In the heart of the Qutub complex in New Delhi, India, stands a monument that looks, at first glance, quite ordinary. It's a black iron pillar about 7 meters tall, inscribed with ancient Sanskrit. But don't let its modest appearance fool you. This pillar has been standing in the open air, exposed to the blistering heat, monsoon rains, and modern pollution of Delhi for over 1,600 years. And yet it has not rusted. Not even a single flake. To put this into perspective, if you left a modern iron rod outside in those same conditions, it would crumble into a pile of reddish dust within a few decades. So how did the ancient Indian metallurgists back in the 4th century AD create something that modern technology still struggles to replicate? For a long time, scientists thought it was just the dry climate of India, or perhaps a lucky fluke in the iron's purity. But they were wrong. In the early 2000s, metallurgists from the Indian Institute of Technology decided to crack the code. They discovered that the pillar isn't just pure iron. In fact, it contains an unusually high amount of phosphorus. But here's the genius part. The ancient blacksmiths used a specific technique called forge welding that pushed this phosphorus to the surface. This created a thin, protective layer called misawite, an amorphous iron oxyhydroxide. Think of it as a natural, molecular-level coating that shields the iron from the atmosphere. Essentially, 1,600 years before the invention of stainless steel, the people of ancient India were practicing nanotechnology. But the mystery doesn't end with the chemistry. It's also about the scale. The pillar weighs over 6 tons. To forge a single, solid piece of iron of that size in the 4th century would have required massive furnaces and a level of heat control that we thought was impossible for that era. It's a silent witness to a lost chemical secret. The Iron Pillar of Delhi isn't just a monument to a king named Chandra. It's a monument to a forgotten scientific brilliance. It stands there today, smooth and cold to the touch, mocking our modern planned obsolescence. It reminds us that while we build things to be replaced, the ancients built things to last forever. For our 5th discovery, we step into the mysterious world of Roman glassmaking. At first glance, this 1,600-year-old chalice, known as the LYCURGUS Cup, looks like a beautiful but standard piece of jade green glass. But don't let your eyes deceive you, because this cup possesses a superpower that shouldn't have been possible until the late 20th century. When you light the cup from the front, it glows with a dull, opaque green. But the moment you place a light source inside the cup, or shine a light through it from behind, the glass undergoes a startling transformation. It turns a deep, vibrant blood red. For centuries, scientists were baffled. They thought it might be a special stain or a chemical reaction to the liquid inside. It wasn't until 1990, when researchers examined fragments of the glass under a high-powered electron microscope, that the truth was revealed, and it left the scientific world in a state of shock. The Romans had infused the glass with particles of silver and gold. But they weren't just flakes. They were ground down into nanoparticles, about 50 nanometers in diameter. To give you an idea of how small that is, a single nanoparticle is 1,000th the size of a grain of salt. When light hits these particles, the electrons vibrate in a way that changes the color depending on the observer's position. This is a phenomenon we now call surface plasmon resonance. Today, we use this exact same science for high-tech sensors and advanced medical diagnostics. But the Romans? They were using it to make the ultimate party trick for their banquets. The most disturbing part for modern scientists isn't just the presence of these particles, it's the precision. The ratio of silver to gold is so exact that it couldn't have happened by accident. One slight mistake in the mixture, and the color-changing effect would be ruined. This means the Romans had a standardized, repeatable process for manipulating matter at a molecular level. How did they do it? They didn't have electron microscopes. They didn't have clean rooms or laser precision tools. Yet they created a masterpiece of nanotechnology that we can only hope to replicate with our most advanced equipment today. The LYCURGUS Cup is proof that 1,600 years ago, someone was playing with the very building blocks of the universe. For our fourth discovery, we traveled deep into the rainforests of South America. Between 500 and 1,000 years ago, the QUIMBAYA people of modern-day Colombia crafted hundreds of small gold figurines to be buried with their dead. Most of these represent what you'd expect: birds, lizards, and jaguars. But among them, archaeologists found a handful of objects that stopped them dead in their tracks. They are known as the QUIMBAYA artifacts. At first, museums labeled them as zoomorphic figures, basically stylized insects or fish. But if you look closer, there's a problem. Nature doesn't design animals like this. These figures possess delta wings, a vertical stabilizer, and a fuselage that is perfectly symmetrical. In the natural world, birds have feathers and they don't have upright tail fins. But in the world of modern engineering, these are the exact requirements for a supersonic jet. For decades, mainstream science dismissed them as artistic imagination. That was until 1994, when three German researchers, August Einbohm, Peter Belting, and Konrad Libers, decided to put that imagination to the test. They didn't just look at the figurines, they built a scale model, exact in every proportion, and equipped it with a propeller and a small engine. The scientific community watched with skepticism. They expected the golden bird to tumble to the ground. Instead, when they launched it, the model took to the skies with breathtaking grace. It didn't just fly, it performed complex maneuvers and landed perfectly. It proved that these ancient shapes weren't just art, they were aerodynamically sound designs. Think about the implications. To create a shape that can achieve stable flight, you need a deep understanding of fluid dynamics and lift-to-drag ratios. These are concepts we only mastered in the last 120 years. So, how did a civilization in the Andes, a millennium ago, stumble upon the perfect design for a delta-wing aircraft? Was it a coincidence? Did they observe a giant, forgotten species of flying fish? Or were the QUIMBAYA people witnessing something in their skies that we have yet to find in the fossil record? Whatever the answer, the QUIMBAYA airplanes stand as a golden challenge to our modern ego, proving that the dream of flight might be far, far older than the Wright brothers. In 1999, a professor at Bashkir State University named Alexander Chuvyarov was searching for evidence of an ancient civilization in the Ural Mountains of Russia. What he found under the porch of a local house wasn't just a relic. It was a 1.5-ton slab of stone that shouldn't exist. It is now known as the DASHKA stone. At first it looked like a jagged piece of rock. But after it was cleaned, a breathtaking 3D relief map emerged. This wasn't a crude drawing. It was a highly accurate topographical map of a specific region in the Ural Mountains. Every valley, every peak, and every river was carved with surgical precision. But here is where the story turns from strange to impossible. As scientists analyzed the map, they realized it depicted massive civil engineering projects, a giant system of canals, dams, and powerful embankments stretching for thousands of kilometers. When they checked modern satellite imagery, the topography matched perfectly. Except for one thing. Those canals and dams aren't there today. To find out when this map was made, researchers analyzed the fossils embedded in the stone. They found two species of ancient shells, one that died out 50 million years ago, and another that vanished 120 million years ago. This suggests the stone slab itself is over 100 million years old. Now, think about the logic here. To create a 3D relief map of an entire mountain range, you need aerial or satellite data. You need advanced cartography. But 100 million years ago, humans weren't even an evolutionary thought. So, who was flying over the Ural Mountains in the age of the dinosaurs, surveying the land and planning massive irrigation systems? The stone is made of 3 layers. The base is a thick dolomite. The second layer is a diopside glass, a material we only recently learned how to process, and it's where the map is carved. The third layer is a protective porcelain. This isn't a natural formation. It's a manufactured, high-tech piece of equipment. Mainstream science struggles to accept it. They argue the shells might be older than the carvings. But even if the map is only 10,000 years old, it still requires technology we didn't have until the 20th century. The DASHKA stone remains a silent, heavy witness to a world before our world, a map left behind by a creator who saw the earth from the stars. Deep in the remote province of Qinghai, China, stands Mount Baigong. It's a desolate, pyramid-shaped peak surrounded by saltwater lakes. In 2002, a group of explorers ventured into a cave on the mountain's slope, and what they found defied everything we know about the history of industry. Embedded into the ancient rock of the cave were hundreds of rusty iron pipes. Some are massive, half a meter in diameter, while others are as thin as a toothpick. They aren't just lying there. They are integrated into the mountain itself, some running deep into the ground, and others leading directly into the nearby saltwater lake. When scientists from the Beijing Institute of Geology took samples of the pipes to be analyzed, the mystery only deepened. They used a technique called thermoluminescence, which measures how long a mineral has been exposed to sunlight. The result? These pipes are at least 150,000 years old. Now let's look at the timeline. 150,000 years ago, modern humans, Homo sapiens, were barely beginning to migrate out of Africa. They were using sharpened stones and fire. They certainly weren't smelting iron, and they definitely weren't building industrial-scale plumbing systems in the remote mountains of China. The analysis of the metal was even more bizarre. The pipes are made of 30% ferric oxide, mixed with high amounts of silicon and calcium. But 8% of the material is labeled as unidentifiable. Even with our modern laboratories, we cannot tell exactly what those elements are. Skeptics argue that these are not pipes at all, but fossilized tree roots that underwent a rare process of mineralization. It's a neat theory, except for one thing. Tree roots are organic and messy. These objects are perfectly hollow, uniform in shape, and arranged in a way that looks intentional, like a cooling system for a prehistoric machine. If they aren't trees, then we are left with a terrifying conclusion. Someone, or something, was conducting heavy industrial work on this planet at a time when we were supposed to be living in caves. Who needed a saltwater delivery system in the middle of a Chinese wasteland 150,000 years ago? The Baigong pipes remain a silent, rusted skeleton of a world that officially never existed. We have reached our #1 spot. To find it, we must travel to the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon, to the ruins of an ancient temple complex known as Baalbek. Now, the Romans built a magnificent temple to Jupiter here, but they built it on top of something impossible. Hidden in the foundation are 3 colossal limestone blocks known as the Trilithon. Each of these stones weighs an estimated 800 tons. To put that in perspective, that is the weight of 2 Boeing 747s each. And they aren't just sitting on the ground. They have been lifted 20 feet into the air and fitted together so tightly that you cannot slide a razor blade between them. But it gets even stranger. Just a short walk from the temple, in a nearby quarry, sits an even larger block, known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. This monster weighs an incredible 1,200 tons. It was partially carved and left there, as if the workers just walked away from the job. Here's the scientific problem that no one can solve. Even today, with our most advanced hydraulic cranes and heavy lift technology, moving a 1,200-ton block of stone is a massive engineering nightmare. It requires specialized equipment, stabilized roads, and months of planning. Yet someone, thousands of years before the invention of the engine, moved these stones across rugged terrain and stacked them with millimeter precision. Modern archaeologists try to explain it using wooden rollers, ropes, and thousands of slaves. But the math doesn't add up. The amount of force needed to overcome the friction of an 800-ton block would snap the strongest hemp ropes like sewing thread. The wooden rollers would be crushed into dust instantly under that much pressure. There is no record in Roman history of how they moved these stones. In fact, many researchers believe the foundation is much, much older than the Roman Empire, perhaps dating back to a lost epoch of humanity that possessed a technology we can't even imagine. Was it acoustic levitation? Was it a lost understanding of gravity? Or a forgotten machinery of the gods? The Trilithon of Baalbek stands as our #1 discovery because it represents a physical limit. It is a mystery you can touch, a mountain of stone moved by hands that, according to our history books, shouldn't have had the power to do it. It is the ultimate proof that the unbreakable laws of our past are meant to be questioned. 10 discoveries. 10 physical anomalies that defy the very foundation of the history we were taught in school. From the nanoscale chemistry of Rome to the 1,000-ton stones of Baalbek, we are left with a staggering realization. Our ancestors were not who we think they were. We often view history as a straight, ascending line, a slow, painful crawl from primitive caves to high-tech skyscrapers. We like this story because it makes us feel like the pinnacle of evolution. But these artifacts tell a different story. They tell a story of a cyclical history. They suggest that humanity has reached the summit of knowledge many times before, only to be pushed back into the shadows by cataclysms, time, or our own mistakes. The London hammer, the BAIGONG pipes, the ULFBERHT steel. These aren't just cool mysteries, they are warning signs. They prove that knowledge is fragile. If our modern civilization vanished tomorrow, would our digital cloud, our plastic world, or our silicon chips survive 10,000 years of erosion? Probably not. We would leave behind nothing but dust, while a single perfectly cut stone or a rust-proof iron pillar would remain to baffle whoever comes after us. Mainstream science may continue to look away, labeling these as coincidences or natural freaks. But you've seen the evidence today. You know that there are chapters of the human story that have been ripped out of the book. We are a species with amnesia, slowly waking up to a much grander, much more mysterious past. So I want to hear from you. Which of these 10 discoveries convinced you the most? Is it the precision of the ancient maps or the high-tech metallurgy of the Vikings? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and I want to know your theories. If you're someone who refuses to accept the standard version of the truth and wants to keep digging deeper into the mysteries of our world, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We are just scratching the surface. Thank you for watching. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and never stop questioning the world around you. Because the truth isn't just out there, it's buried right beneath our feet. See you in the next discovery.